The desert sky was screaming orange when Grayson Knox pulled his black Range Rover into the gravel lot of Dusty's Diner, a flickering sign buzzing against the dark. He'd been on the road since morning, finishing paperwork on a logistics deal in Tucson, and his stomach was reminding him he hadn't eaten since breakfast. The diner was the kind of place time forgot. Cracked vinyl booths, a jukebox that hadn't worked since the Clinton administration, and the smell of burnt coffee hanging in the air like a permanent fixture. Grayson liked places like this. Nobody recognized him here. Nobody whispered his name behind cupped hands the way they did in Chicago. He slid into a corner booth, back to the wall, eyes on the door. Old habits.
"What can I get you, hon?"
He looked up. The waitress was maybe mid-20s, soft brown hair pulled into a messy bun, curves filling out her uniform in a way that made the fabric look like it had given up trying to contain her. Her smile was warm, practiced, the kind every waitress learns by her third shift, but her eyes told a different story. They kept flicking toward the front window every few seconds, like she was counting down to something. "Coffee, and whatever's good tonight," Grayson said. "Meatloaf's good, everything else is a gamble." A small, real laugh slipped out before she caught herself. Her name tag read Harper. She brought his food 20 minutes later, and Grayson noticed her hand trembling slightly as she set the plate down. Not from carrying a tray, something else. He ate slowly, watching the diner empty out as the hour grew late. An old trucker in the corner booth finished his pie and left. A young couple paid and walked out hand in hand. By 8:30, Grayson was the only customer left, and Harper kept glancing at the clock above the register, like it owed her money. When he finished, she brought the bill in a worn leather folder and set it on the table without a word. No small talk this time, no practiced smile, just a quick, tight nod before she turned to walk away. Grayson opened the folder to find his total and slide his card in, but underneath the receipt, scrawled in shaky handwriting on a torn napkin, were 5 words that stopped him cold. "Help me. They're coming back tonight." He read it twice, then a third time, just to be sure his eyes weren't playing tricks on him after a long day. His first instinct was to call her back over, ask what the hell this meant. But before he could lift his hand, the bell above the diner's front door jingled, and 3 men walked in. They weren't lost travelers looking for a midnight snack. Grayson clocked that immediately. 2 of them were built like men who spent their free time doing more than lifting weights, with jackets too heavy for the desert heat, the kind that hid something underneath. The third, older, walked with the calm authority of someone used to being obeyed. His eyes swept the diner once, landing on Harper for a beat too long before moving on. Grayson watched Harper transform in front of him. The trembling hand steadied, her shoulders squared. She plastered on that same waitress smile and walked toward the men like they were just 3 more customers needing a table. "Evening, gentlemen. Take a seat anywhere you like." "We're not staying," the older man said, voice low and flat. "Just need a word." Grayson kept his head down, sliding his card into the folder, moving slow enough to listen without looking like he was listening. He'd spent a decade learning how to read rooms, how to disappear in plain sight, even while being the most dangerous man in it. Right now, every instinct in his body was screaming that something was wrong with this picture, and the napkin in his hand was proof he wasn't imagining it. "I already told you people," Harper said, voice even. "I don't know anything about a package." "That's not what I asked you," the older man replied. "I asked if you remembered anything unusual, a delivery, anything out of place. Things get delivered here every day. It's a diner." The man studied her for a long moment, the kind of stare meant to crack people open. Harper didn't blink. "We'll be in touch," he finally said, and the 3 of them walked out as quietly as they'd come in, the bell jingling behind them like nothing had happened at all. Harper exhaled, walked back to the register, and rang up another table that didn't exist, hands busy with nothing in particular. Grayson recognized the move. She was giving herself something to do so she wouldn't fall apart, standing still. He looked down at the napkin again, then at her. Most men in his position would have paid the bill, walked out, and forgotten the whole thing by the time they hit the highway. It wasn't his problem. He had a flight to catch, a business to run, 50 other things waiting back in Chicago that actually mattered. But Grayson Knox had built his entire life on reading what people didn't say out loud, and Harper Quinn was screaming without making a sound. He folded the napkin once, slid it into his jacket pocket, and waited until the last set of headlights pulled out of the lot. Then he stood, walked to the counter, and said the only thing that felt true. "I'm not leaving yet." Harper froze behind the counter, dish towel still in her hand. "Excuse me?" "I said I'm not leaving yet," Grayson repeated, calm as ever. "Closing time's in 20 minutes, right? I'll wait outside." "Look, I don't know what you think you saw." "I saw a napkin that said help me. I saw 3 men who weren't here for meatloaf, and I saw you handle it like someone who's done this before." He kept his voice low, steady, the kind of tone that didn't invite argument but didn't threaten either. "I'm not asking you to explain anything right now. I'm just saying I'll be in the parking lot." She stared at him like she was trying to decide if he was crazy, dangerous, or just bored. Grayson didn't blame her. A stranger in an expensive jacket offering to wait around after dark wasn't exactly comforting. "You don't even know me," she said quietly. "No, but I know what fear looks like, and you're wearing it well enough that you almost had me fooled."
He left a $100 bill on the counter for a $14 meal and walked out before she could argue further. True to his word, he waited in his Range Rover at the far end of the lot, lights off, watching the diner through the rearview mirror. At 9:15, the neon sign clicked dark, and a few minutes later, Harper stepped out, locking the door behind her. She didn't head straight to her car. Instead, she stood under the dim street lamp, glancing both directions like she was checking for something specific. That's when the same black sedan from earlier rolled slowly into the lot. The 2 younger men got out first, flanking her on either side, while the older man stayed near the car, arms crossed, watching from a distance like a man who never dirtied his own hands. Grayson didn't approach.
He stayed low, window cracked just enough to catch pieces of the conversation carried on the night air. "We know it came here," one of the men said. "Don't waste our time." "I told your boss already. I don't know anything about a package." "A shipment doesn't just disappear, sweetheart. Somebody signed for it." "Maybe check with the actual shipping company instead of scaring waitresses at closing time," Harper shot back, and Grayson felt an odd flicker of respect for her nerve, considering she looked ready to shake apart from the inside. The man stepped closer, lowering his voice in a way that was somehow worse than shouting. "We'll be back, and next time, we won't be so polite." They left as quickly as they'd come, taillights disappearing down the empty highway. Harper stood alone under the street lamp for a long moment, arms wrapped around herself, before Grayson finally stepped out of his car. She jumped at the sound of his door. "You followed me?" "I waited. There's a difference." He kept his distance, hands visible, non-threatening. "Want to tell me what's actually going on, or should I keep guessing?" Harper let out a shaky breath, something between a laugh and a sob. "You should just get back in your car and forget you ever stopped here tonight. That's the smart thing to do." "Probably," Grayson agreed. "I'm not always known for doing the smart thing." She studied him for a long moment under the buzzing street lamp, like she was weighing whether trusting a total stranger could possibly be worse than the situation she was already in. Finally, something in her shoulders gave way. "There's a package," she said. "About a week ago. It showed up at the diner with my address on the label, except it wasn't supposed to come here. I figured it was a mix-up, some delivery error, so I kept it in my apartment, thinking somebody would eventually call asking for it." She wrapped her arms tighter around herself. "Nobody called. Then those men started showing up, asking questions like I'd stolen something valuable. I haven't even opened it. I was too scared to." "Where is it now?" "Still in my apartment, still sealed." Grayson considered this for a moment, the pieces sliding into place in his mind. A package nobody claimed, men dangerous enough to make a stranger's hands shake just from a conversation. This wasn't a simple shipping mistake, and Harper clearly knew it too, even if she didn't want to say it out loud. "I can help you," he said finally, "but I need to see what's inside first. No promises beyond that." "Why would you even want to get involved in this? You don't owe me anything." "You wrote 'help me' on a napkin and handed it to a complete stranger," Grayson said. "That's not something people do unless they've run out of other options. So either you trust me enough to let me look, or you spend tonight alone waiting for those men to come back with worse intentions." Harper looked at him for a long, quiet moment, headlights from a passing truck briefly lighting up the uncertainty on her face. Then she nodded toward a beat-up sedan parked near the diner's side entrance. "My apartment's 15 minutes from here," she said. "Follow me." Harper's apartment was small and tidy, the kind of place that looked lived in carefully rather than comfortably, like someone who'd learned not to get too attached to anywhere. A single lamp lit the living room. She moved straight to the closet, pulling out a shoebox-sized package wrapped in plain brown paper, tape still sealed tight along every edge. "Here," she said, setting it on the coffee table like it might bite her. "I haven't touched it since the day it came." Grayson crouched beside the table, studying the label first. No return address. A shipping company name he didn't recognize, printed in a font that looked slightly off, like someone had mimicked a real logo rather than used one. He'd seen enough forged paperwork in his line of work to know fake when it stared back at him. "You said this showed up with your address on it?" "My exact address, apartment number and everything. I thought maybe I ordered something and forgot, but I checked my accounts. Nothing." She sat on the edge of the couch, knees pulled in like she was trying to take up less space in the world. "I almost threw it out. I wish I had." Grayson pulled a pocket knife from his jacket and sliced through the tape carefully, peeling back the paper. Inside sat 3 objects, each wrapped separately in bubble wrap. A flash drive, small and unmarked. An old paper map, folded so many times the creases had gone soft and gray. And a brass key with a number etched into its head, the kind used for storage units. No money, no jewelry, nothing that screamed valuable at first glance. "This is it?" Harper asked, leaning forward despite herself. "This is what they're terrorizing me over?" "This is exactly the kind of thing people terrorize someone over," Grayson said quietly. "Cash and jewelry get noticed. Information doesn't, until it's too late." He turned the flash drive over in his fingers, debating his next move. He could walk away right now, tell Harper to call the police and let them handle it, go back to his life in Chicago like none of this ever happened. That would be the easy choice. Instead, he pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. "Mason, I need eyes on something tonight. Encrypted drive, unknown contents." A pause while he listened. "No, not over the phone. I need you here in person, and I need this kept quiet, just between us." Mason Reed arrived within the hour, looking like he'd rolled straight out of bed and into his car, hoodie rumpled and laptop bag slung over one shoulder. He'd been with Grayson for 6 years, the kind of tech mind that could crack systems most people didn't know existed, and the kind of loyalty that didn't ask too many questions until it mattered. He glanced at Harper, then at Grayson, raising an eyebrow but saying nothing about the obvious oddity of the situation. He simply sat at the kitchen table, plugged the drive into a laptop wrapped in enough security software to make a bank nervous, and got to work. The encryption took him nearly 2 hours to crack, fingers moving steadily across the keyboard while Harper paced the small apartment and Grayson sat in silence, patient as stone. Finally, Mason exhaled and turned the screen around. "Okay. This isn't random," he said. "These are shipping manifests, coded inventory numbers, transport schedules, multiple states. Whoever built this system knew exactly what they were doing." Grayson leaned closer, scanning lines of numbers and abbreviated location codes that meant nothing to an untrained eye, but told a clear story to someone who'd spent years around legitimate logistics work. "These patterns, they're moving goods disguised as ordinary freight. High value, low visibility." "Stolen goods," Mason confirmed. "I'd bet money on it. Look at the discrepancies between declared weight and actual transport costs. Somebody's hiding cargo inside legal shipments." Harper stopped pacing, color draining from her face. So I've had evidence of some kind of smuggling operation sitting in my closet for a week. Looks that way, Grayson said, and they think I stole it on purpose. They don't know what you know or don't know. All they see is a missing piece of their operation that ended up in the hands of a stranger. That makes you a problem they need to solve, one way or another. He kept his tone even, but the weight of what he was saying sat heavy in the small apartment. Harper sank onto the couch, hands pressed against her face. This isn't supposed to be my life. I serve coffee and meatloaf to truckers. I don't deal with smugglers and flash drives and men threatening me in parking lots. Grayson watched her for a moment, something unfamiliar tightening in his chest. He'd built walls around himself for years, learned not to get pulled into other people's chaos unless there was something in it for him. But there was nothing calculated about the fear on Harper's face, and nothing about this situation suggested she deserved what was coming for her. You're in it now, he said quietly. Question is whether you face it alone or not. Harper lifted her head, eyes red but steady. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't walk away from things halfway. Grayson stood, pocketing the flash drive while Mason began packing up his laptop. Tomorrow, we figure out what that storage key opens. Tonight, you're not staying here alone. Morning came too fast for Harper, who'd spent the night on Grayson's hotel suite couch, jolting awake twice from nightmares she didn't bother explaining. By 8, the four of them, Grayson, Harper, Mason, and a new face named Cole Mercer, were piled into a rented SUV heading toward a storage facility on the outskirts of Phoenix. Cole had arrived sometime before dawn, summoned the same way Mason had been, with a single phone call that asked no questions and demanded total discretion. He was broader than Mason, quieter too, the kind of presence that filled a room without trying. Grayson's head of security for nearly a decade, Cole had a way of scanning every space they entered, like he was already calculating 3 exits before anyone else noticed the door. You sure about this? Cole asked from the driver's seat, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror where Harper sat clutching the brass key like it might vanish if she let go. No, Grayson admitted. But sitting around waiting for those men to come back isn't an option either. The facility itself was unremarkable, rows of orange roll-up doors baking under the desert sun, a tired-looking attendant manning a booth near the entrance who barely glanced up from his phone as they passed. Unit 114 sat near the back row, half hidden behind a row of dumpsters. Harper's hand trembled slightly as she fitted the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click, and the door rolled up with a metallic groan that seemed too loud in the quiet morning air. Inside, the unit was mostly empty. Dozens of shipping crates lined the walls, all of them open, all of them hollow. Whatever had once filled them was long gone, leaving only foam padding and scattered packing slips on the concrete floor. Somebody cleared this out fast, Cole said, stepping inside first and sweeping the space with practiced eyes. Look at the dust patterns. Crates have been moved recently. Weeks, maybe days. Mason crouched near a stack of papers in the corner, sorting through transportation records with quick, careful hands. These are dated, going back almost a year. Whoever ran this operation used this unit as a staging point, moving cargo through in batches. Grayson walked the perimeter slowly, studying everything without touching much. His eyes caught on a folded paper tucked behind one of the empty crates, easy to miss unless you were looking for exactly that kind of thing. He pulled it free and unfolded it carefully. It was a transport schedule, similar to the data on the flash drive, but handwritten in the margins, with notes that read like shorthand only the writer would understand. One line near the bottom had been circled, twice, in red ink. Vegas, final transfer point. Confirm with R. This isn't just about Arizona, Grayson said, holding up the paper. There's a whole chain. This was one stop along a route. Harper stood near the entrance, arms wrapped around herself, watching the 3 men work like she was witnessing some strange ritual she didn't understand the rules of. I don't get it. Why would they leave this unit unlocked for a year and then suddenly need it cleared out, the same week that package landed on my doorstep? It was a fair question, and one Grayson didn't have a clean answer for yet. Maybe the package wasn't supposed to leave the chain at all. he said slowly, thinking it through as he spoke. Maybe it got misrouted, ended up at your diner by mistake, and whoever's running this operation panicked the second they realized a piece of their evidence was sitting outside their control. So I'm not the target. I'm just collateral damage. For now, Grayson said. That can change quickly if they think you've seen what's in that drive. Cole moved toward the back wall, running his fingers along a section of drywall that looked slightly different from the rest, newer, like it had been patched recently. He knocked twice, listening to the hollow sound underneath. Someone's been in here recently, doing more than just moving crates. This wall's been worked on. Could be nothing, Mason offered. Could be, Cole agreed, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. Grayson crouched near the floor, where a faint outline in the dust revealed something had been dragged recently, scuff marks leading toward the door that didn't match their own footprints. Someone else had been here, and not long ago. We need to move, he said, standing and folding the schedule into his jacket pocket. If they came back to clean this place out and didn't finish the job, they'll be back to finish it. We don't want to be standing here when that happens. They left the unit exactly as they'd found it, locking the door behind them and walking back to the SUV at a measured pace that didn't betray the urgency Grayson felt building in his chest. This wasn't a misplaced package anymore. This was a trail, deliberately left behind by someone, and someone else was working just as hard to erase it. As Cole pulled out of the lot, Harper finally broke the silence that had settled over the car. What happens now? Grayson looked out at the desert stretching toward the horizon, already thinking 3 steps ahead the way he'd trained himself to for years. Now we follow it to Vegas, he said, and we find out exactly who R is before they find out about us. The drive from Phoenix to Las Vegas took close to 5 hours, the desert stretching flat and endless on either side of the highway, while Mason worked from the back seat, cross-referencing the handwritten schedule against the data pulled from the flash drive. By the time they crossed into Nevada, he'd found enough overlapping details to point them toward a specific address on the industrial edge of the city. The warehouse sat in a stretch of half-abandoned commercial lots, the kind of place where businesses opened and folded so quickly nobody bothered learning their names. A faded sign above the loading dock read nothing more than a unit number, the original company name long since painted over. This is it, Mason said, comparing coordinates on his laptop screen. Matches 3 separate entries in the manifest data. Grayson didn't move to approach right away. Instead, he had Cole park the SUV across the street near a row of parked freight trucks, far enough to avoid suspicion, but close enough to watch the building's activity. We don't go in blind, he said. Not until we understand what we're walking into. For 2 days, they took turns watching the warehouse from a distance, Cole and Grayson trading shifts while Harper and Mason stayed back at the hotel, far removed from anything that might put Harper in direct danger again. It was tedious work, hours of nothing followed by sudden bursts of activity that demanded full attention. By the second afternoon, the pattern became clear. Delivery trucks arrived at almost identical times each day, different company logos painted on their sides, different drivers behind the wheel. But the same loading dock, the same unloading routine, the same careful efficiency that suggested coordination rather than coincidence. Harper, who'd insisted on joining the second day's watch despite Grayson's hesitation, noticed something the others had missed. Look at the schedule, she said, pointing to her notebook where she'd been timing each arrival. Every truck shows up within 10 minutes of the last one leaving. That's not normal delivery traffic. That's planned. Grayson glanced at her notes, surprised by the sharpness of the observation. You're right. Real shipping companies don't coordinate like that unless they're working off the same internal schedule. Different names, same playbook, Mason added, joining them after reviewing the footage Cole had captured on a long-range lens. I cross-checked the company names painted on those trucks. 3 of them don't even exist as registered businesses. They're shells. Shells moving real cargo, Grayson said, the picture sharpening in his mind. Disguising stolen goods as ordinary freight by rotating through fake company names so nothing ever looks suspicious to anyone glancing twice. Harper sat back, processing the scale of what they were describing. This isn't some small operation, is it? This is bigger than a missing package and a few angry men in a parking lot. Much bigger, Grayson confirmed. Which means whoever's leading this isn't going to show up at a warehouse loading dock to get their hands dirty. They'll stay buried, several layers removed from anything that could connect back to them directly. So how do we find them? Grayson considered the question carefully. Confronting the men at the warehouse would solve nothing, he knew that much. They were low-level operators, replaceable pieces in a machine that would simply reroute around any disruption. Real damage meant finding whoever sat at the top, the person controlling the schedules, the routes, the entire chain that stretched from Arizona to wherever it ended. "We don't move on the warehouse," he said finally. "Not yet. We watch, we document, and we find whoever's coordinating the schedule. That's the person worth finding." That evening, back at the hotel, Mason spread printouts across the table, comparing handwriting samples from the storage unit notes against patterns in the digital files. There's a name that keeps surfacing in different forms throughout these records, sometimes just an initial, sometimes a partial name, but it's consistent across multiple shipments going back months. "What name?" Harper asked. "Hard to say definitively yet. The files are deliberately vague, probably intentional in case anyone outside the operation ever got access. But there's a pattern of meetings logged at locations along this exact route, Phoenix, here in Vegas, and at least 2 more states ahead." Grayson studied the map Mason had pieced together, lines connecting cities like a trail of breadcrumbs leading somewhere specific. Whoever's running this isn't static. They're moving along with the operation, staying close enough to control it, without being tied down to any single location. "That makes them harder to find," Cole said. "It also means they're not invincible," Grayson replied. "Someone who keeps moving leaves traces everywhere they go. Hotels, meetings, people who remember faces, even when they forget names." Harper looked up from the table, something resolved, settling into her expression that hadn't been there days earlier in the diner parking lot. "Then we keep following the traces." Grayson met her eyes, recognizing the shift in her, fear slowly giving way to something steadier. "We keep following them," he agreed, "until we find the person who started all of this." Outside the hotel window, the Las Vegas skyline blinked and pulsed against the night sky, indifferent to the quiet war being waged in one of its 1,000 anonymous rooms. Somewhere out there, threaded through warehouses and shell companies and coded shipping manifests, was a name waiting to be uncovered. And for the first time since handing a stranger a desperate note on a torn napkin, Harper Quinn looked like someone ready to find it. The lead took them 20 minutes outside Vegas to Henderson, where Mason had traced one of the coded entries to a roadside motel that had clearly seen better decades. The Sundowner Inn looked like it belonged in a postcard from 1985, faded blue paint peeling off the exterior, a pool out front that hadn't held water in years. "This is where the manifest says a meeting happened," Mason said, double-checking the coordinates against his laptop as Cole parked the SUV in the half-empty lot. 3 separate dates, same room number. The motel's manager turned out to be a retired man named Walt, somewhere in his 70s, who'd run the place since before any of them were born, and seemed delighted to have actual visitors to talk to. When Grayson mentioned they were trying to track down some old guest records for what he vaguely described as a logistics audit, Walt didn't ask too many questions. He simply led them into a back office cluttered with file boxes and an ancient computer that looked like it had survived several different centuries. "Don't get much call for these anymore," Walt said, digging through a cabinet stuffed with paper registration cards. "Everything's digital now, but I kept the old system going out of stubbornness. Folks used to like writing their names down themselves." Harper crouched beside the cabinet, helping sort through cards by date while Mason cross-referenced numbers from his laptop. It was slow, tedious work, but 20 minutes in, Harper went still, staring at a card in her hand. "Grayson." He crossed the room and looked over her shoulder. The card listed a guest under the name Robert Hale, checked in on one of the exact dates flagged in the manifest. But it was the handwriting that made Harper's face pale. "I know this handwriting," she said quietly. I've seen it before. Where? On the package, the original shipping label that had my address on it. I remember thinking the handwriting looked off, too neat for a regular delivery slip. She held the card next to her memory, frowning. I'm almost positive this is the same person. Mason pulled up a photo he'd taken of the original packaging before they'd disposed of it, zooming in on the handwritten portions. He set it beside the registration card. The slant of the letters, the particular way the R curled at the bottom, matched closely enough that even Cole, standing over their shoulders, gave a low whistle. Robert Hale, Cole said. Bet that's not his real name. Probably not, Grayson agreed. But it's a thread. Walt, did this man ever come back? Multiple stays, maybe? Walt squinted at the name, scratching his chin. Hale. Yeah, actually. Came through here a handful of times over the past year. Always paid cash, always asked for the same room, always left before checkout time like he didn't want anyone getting too good a look at him in daylight. Any idea where he went after his last stay? Walt shuffled through a few more cards before pulling one out triumphantly. Last time he checked out, he asked me for directions to the interstate heading toward Denver, made some comment about hating the drive but needing to make good time. Stuck with me because most folks don't usually share their travel plans with an old man at a front desk. Grayson felt the pieces shifting into place. Denver. Another city along the same chain stretching from Arizona through Nevada and now Colorado. Each stop another layer deeper into whatever operation this man was running. This is the coordinator, Grayson said, half to himself. Not the top of the chain, probably, but the one keeping everything moving on schedule. If we find him in Denver, we find out who he answers to. Harper sat back on her heels, processing the weight of what they'd just uncovered. So this whole time, the person responsible for terrorizing me over a missing package was staying in rundown motels under fake names, leaving a trail without even realizing it. People who think they're untouchable get sloppy, Grayson said. They stop covering every angle because they've never been caught before. Cole was already thinking ahead, arms crossed as he studied the map Mason pulled up on his laptop screen. We can't just walk into Denver and start asking around for a man who calls himself Robert Hale. If word gets back to him that someone's tracking his movements, he'll vanish, and we lose the only solid lead we've got. Agreed, Grayson said. We move carefully. No direct contact. No confrontation yet. We learn his routine, find out who he's meeting in Denver, and we make sure none of this ever traces back to Harper. And if it does trace back to me anyway? Harper asked, voice quieter than before. Grayson turned to her, something steady and certain in his expression. Then it traces back to me first. I didn't bring you this far to let you stand alone at the end of it. Walt, still hovering nearby with the curious patience of a man who hadn't had this much excitement at his front desk in years, cleared his throat. Whatever you folks are really doing here, hope you get whoever you're looking for. Man like that, showing up under fake names, paying cash, never looking anybody in the eye for too long. Always figured he was up to something. You figured right, Grayson said, thanking him before they packed up and headed back toward the SUV. Denver now glowing on the horizon of their plan, like a destination they couldn't afford to reach unprepared. Denver greeted them with cooler air and a sky heavier with clouds than the desert they'd left behind. Cole had spent the drive making calls through old contacts, the kind of quiet network built over years of careful relationships, until he'd narrowed down a private distribution center on the city's industrial outskirts that matched patterns in the manifest data. This is bigger than the Vegas warehouse, Mason said, studying satellite images on his laptop as they sat parked a safe distance away. Look at the size of this place. Loading bays on 3 sides, fenced perimeter, security cameras every 20 feet. This isn't some shell company front. This is the actual hub. Grayson studied the building through a pair of binoculars, watching trucks roll in and out with the same disciplined efficiency they'd witnessed in Las Vegas, except magnified, multiplied, an entire operation funneling through one central point. If Robert Hale's coordinating shipments, this is where he'd need to be. They didn't have to wait long. By the second morning, Cole spotted a man matching Walt's description stepping out of a black sedan near the loading bay entrance. Mid-40s, gray suit, slightly too sharp for industrial work, moving with the brisk confidence of someone who belonged exactly where he stood.
"That's him," Harper said, peering through the binoculars Grayson handed her. "I'm sure of it. Same build, same way of walking, like he's always in a hurry but never rushing."
Back at the hotel that evening, Mason finally cracked the remaining encrypted files on the flash drive, the data resisting his efforts for days until something in the algorithm finally gave way. What spilled out across his screen was more than anyone had anticipated. Complete shipment routes stretching across 6 states. Warehouse locations disguised under a dozen shell company names. Financial records showing transfers moving through accounts that existed only on paper.
"This is everything," Mason said, scrolling through page after page of documentation. "Every shipment, every fake business, every dollar laundered through this network for at least the past 18 months.
Grayson leaned over his shoulder, scanning figures that represented a smuggling operation far larger than any of them had initially imagined. This isn't just stolen goods moving through legitimate-looking freight. This is a whole financial structure built specifically to make all of it disappear into ordinary commerce. "What do we do with it?" Harper asked, watching the screen with an expression caught somewhere between relief and disbelief that something so small as a misdelivered package had unraveled into this. Grayson had already been turning the question over for the better part of a day, weighing options most people in his position wouldn't have bothered considering. He could have used the information differently, leveraged it, turned it into something that served his own interests in the world he came from. Instead, he made a different call. "We send it to the authorities," he said, anonymously, through channels that can't be traced back to any of us. Cole raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. He'd worked alongside Grayson long enough to know when a decision had already been made, weighed carefully, and settled. "You sure about that?" Mason asked. "Once this is out there, there's no pulling it back." "That's the point," Grayson said. "If we hand this over quietly through the right legal channels, the kind that can't be bought off or buried, this operation collapses for good. Hale and whoever he answers to won't be able to simply pack up and disappear like they have before." It took most of the night to route the files securely, Mason working through layers of protection to ensure nothing could trace the evidence back to Harper's apartment or any of their names. By early morning, the documentation had landed anonymously in the hands of investigators known for pursuing exactly this kind of cross-state kidnapping case, the kind of attention that didn't go away once it started. The shift happened almost immediately. By midday, Cole's contacts reported unusual activity at the Denver distribution center. Trucks leaving early, workers being sent home without explanation, the kind of scramble that only happened when someone realized they'd been found out. "They know," Harper said, watching the warehouse through binoculars from their distant vantage point as a second black sedan pulled away in a hurry. "Look at them. They're running." "Not running," Grayson corrected. "Retreating. Big difference. Running is panic. This is someone trying to salvage what's left before it all falls apart completely." Harper lowered the binoculars, turning to look at him with something unreadable in her expression. "A week ago, I was terrified some men in suits were going to hurt me over a package I never even wanted. Now I'm watching an entire smuggling operation collapse because of it." "Things have a way of turning," Grayson said quietly. "Sometimes the worst moment of your life ends up being the start of something you never expected." She held his gaze a beat longer than necessary, something unspoken passing between them that neither acknowledged out loud. Mason cleared his throat, breaking the moment, gesturing toward his laptop where new data was streaming in. "There's one more shipment scheduled," he said. "Final one, set to arrive at a distribution hub outside Chicago in 2 days. If Hale and whoever he's working for still think the flash drive's missing, they might try to recover it before everything falls apart entirely." Grayson's expression sharpened, the pieces of an ending finally coming into view. "Then that's where this finishes. Chicago." Chicago felt different from every other stop along the way, partly because it was Grayson's city, the place where he actually held power instead of operating as a careful observer from a distance. The distribution hub sat near the outskirts, a massive complex of warehouses that handled freight for half the Midwest. easy enough for a smuggling operation to disappear inside.
They still think the flash drive's out there somewhere, unaccounted for, Mason explained, laying out the plan on a hotel room table covered in printouts and a rough sketch of the hub's layout.
Hale doesn't know we've already copied and sent everything to investigators. As far as he knows, the original data is still the only loose thread left.
Which means he'll come looking for it himself, Grayson said.
Or send someone close enough to him that we can finally put a name to whoever's actually running this. Cole had already scouted the property twice, mapping entry points, security rotations, and the exact loading bay where the final shipment was scheduled to arrive. If they're desperate enough to recover the drive, they'll need someone on the inside, someone who can access the warehouse without raising suspicion. That gives us an opening. The plan came together carefully over the following day.
Grayson would set up what looked like a deal to return the flash drive, using a contact deep enough in the criminal world to be believable, but not directly tied to his own organization. It would draw whoever was sent to retrieve it into the open, into a controlled situation where Cole's people could identify them without anyone getting hurt. Harper sat through the planning sessions mostly in silence, watching Grayson move pieces around like a man who'd done this kind of thing before, calm and methodical in a way that should have unsettled her more than it did. When the room finally cleared out for the night, she found him alone on the hotel balcony, city lights stretching out below.
"You're not going to let me come tomorrow, are you?" she asked.
No. Figured. She leaned against the railing beside him. A week ago, you were a stranger sitting in my section ordering meatloaf. Now you're planning an operation to bring down a criminal network like it's just another Tuesday.
It's not just another Tuesday, Grayson said. But yes, this is closer to my world than yours. Tomorrow needs to happen without you anywhere near it. You've already given them a reason to think you're involved. I'm not giving them another chance to confirm it. Harper studied him in the dim light, something soft crossing her face that hadn't been there in the diner parking lot days earlier.
"Thank you for not walking away when you had every reason to."
"I don't walk away from people who deserve better than what they're handed," Grayson said simply, and the moment held a beat longer than either of them probably intended before he stepped back inside to finish preparations for the morning.
The exchange was set for an isolated corner of the distribution hub, far from regular loading activity, just before dawn, when traffic through the complex was lightest. Grayson's contact arrived first, playing the part of a middleman willing to sell the flash drive back for the right price.
Cole's people were positioned at every exit, watching from positions that wouldn't draw attention until it mattered. Robert Hale himself didn't show. Instead, he sent two men Grayson recognized instantly from the diner parking lot in Arizona, the same pair who'd cornered Harper outside Dusty's that first night. They approached cautiously, eyes scanning the empty loading bay for anything that looked wrong. "Where's the drive?" one of them asked. "Where's the money?" Grayson's contact replied, playing his role exactly as instructed. The exchange unfolded slowly, deliberately, giving Cole's team time to close in from multiple angles before either man realized what was happening. By the time they understood they'd walked into something far different than a simple buyback, there was nowhere left to run. Within minutes, both men were detained, their phones and vehicles seized, providing exactly the kind of physical evidence that would tie directly back to Hale and the network above him. It happened fast, no shots fired, no struggle beyond a few moments of shouted protest before reality set in. Grayson watched from a distance as local authorities, alerted anonymously hours earlier, arrived to take over from there. The same legal channels Mason had routed the evidence through, now closing the final loop. By that afternoon, reports began surfacing of arrests connected to a cross-state operation, names and locations matching almost exactly what they'd uncovered over the past week. Robert Hale's actual identity unraveled within days once investigators had real evidence to work from, exposing a man who'd spent years hiding behind fake names and shell companies, finally caught by the same careful trail he'd left behind without realizing it. Harper read the news from the hotel room, scrolling through articles that mentioned nothing about a curvy waitress from a roadside diner in Arizona, nothing about a desperate napkin or a sealed package that had started everything. Her name appeared nowhere in connection to any of it. She was finally completely free. When Grayson returned that evening, exhaustion etched into his features, but something lighter in his eyes than she'd seen the entire week. Harper crossed the room and hugged him without saying a word. He hesitated only a moment before wrapping his arms around her, the two of them standing quietly in the aftermath of everything that had finally come undone.
2 weeks passed before things finally settled into something that felt like peace. Harper had spent the time in a kind of suspended disbelief, half expecting a knock at the door or a call that would drag her back into the chaos she'd barely survived. But the days kept passing quietly, and slowly she allowed herself to believe it was actually over. Grayson had checked in every few days, sometimes by phone, sometimes showing up in person with no real excuse beyond making sure she was doing all right. And Harper found herself looking forward to those visits more than she wanted to admit. It was Grayson who brought up Nashville first, almost casually, the way someone mentions an idea they've actually been thinking about for a while but pretends just occurred to them. "I own a stake in a few hospitality businesses," he said one evening over takeout in her apartment. "Nothing flashy. A small cafe in Nashville needs someone to manage it. Good location, steady customers, owners looking for someone who actually cares about the place instead of just clocking hours." Harper had looked up from her container of noodles, suspicious. "Is this your way of telling me to leave Arizona?" "It's my way of telling you that you don't have to stay somewhere just because it's familiar," Grayson said. "You've got people asking questions about that diner now, about why you suddenly stopped showing up for shifts after some men came asking about a delivery. Even with everything cleared up, small towns remember things longer than they should." She'd known he was right, even before he said it out loud. The diner didn't feel like home anymore. Hadn't since the night 3 men walked through that door looking for something she never even wanted in the first place. Every shift since had felt like waiting for a shadow to return. So she said yes. The move happened faster than Harper expected, Grayson handling logistics with the same quiet efficiency he'd shown throughout the entire ordeal, until she found herself standing in front of a small cafe on a tree-lined street in Nashville, sunlight pouring through wide front windows onto mismatched wooden tables and a chalkboard menu waiting for her to fill it in. Mason and Cole had become permanent fixtures in her life by then, an odd kind of family built out of shared danger and late nights piecing together a criminal trail across 5 states. Mason helped set up the cafe's point-of-sale system without being asked, muttering about outdated technology the entire time. Cole showed up the week of opening, claiming he just happened to be in the area, though everyone in the room knew better. Opening day arrived with a steady stream of curious locals, drawn in by good coffee and the kind of warmth Harper brought to every table she served. The same warmth that had nothing fake about it, now that fear wasn't sitting underneath every smile. Grayson showed up in the late afternoon, sliding into a corner booth out of habit, the same instinct that had made him choose a seat with his back to the wall and his eyes on the door that first night in Arizona. Some things, apparently, didn't change. Harper brought him coffee without being asked, the way she once had a stranger passing through on his way somewhere else. Except now, there was nothing nervous in her hands, nothing rehearsed in her smile. "Place looks good," Grayson said, glancing around at the warm wooden interior, the hum of conversation filling a room that had been empty and quiet just hours earlier. "Feels good," Harper said. "Feels like mine." She left to handle a few more tables, and when she returned, she set a folded receipt down on his table along with the bill, the same worn leather folder she might have used 100 times before in a different life. Grayson opened it, half expecting nothing more than a total and a thank you. Instead, beneath the receipt, in handwriting steadier than the shaky scrawl he remembered from that desert diner weeks ago, were 6 words. "Thank you for believing a stranger." He read it once, then looked up to find Harper watching him from across the cafe, a small, knowing smile on her face, waiting to see what he'd do. Grayson folded the note carefully and tucked it into his wallet, right next to the original napkin he'd kept from that first night, without ever quite explaining to himself why. "Anytime,"
he said simply.
Harper laughed, the kind of full, easy laugh that came from somewhere genuine, nothing held back or guarded, the way it had been every time he'd seen her in those first frightening days. You say that like you're planning on making a habit of believing strangers who hand you notes. Depends on the stranger, Grayson said, and something passed between them that felt less like the end of an ordeal and more like the start of something neither of them had planned for, but both seemed willing to see through. Outside, Nashville buzzed with its usual evening energy, music drifting from a bar down the street, strangers passing each other on the sidewalk without a second glance, each one carrying stories nobody else would ever know. Somewhere among them, a curvy waitress and a Mafia boss sat together in a small cafe that smelled like fresh coffee and second chances, two lives that never should have crossed, now bound together by one unexpected dinner stop on a quiet Arizona highway.
Grayson finished his coffee, left a generous tip out of habit, and walked out into the evening light, knowing he'd be back tomorrow. And the day after that, and likely every day for a long time to come.